A young man is walking across a city crosswalk when he suddenly turns and sees a speeding truck rushing right toward him. He gasps in shock just before the impact. In the next moment, drops of blood fall into a dark pool. A young man lies face down in a snowy landscape, bleeding heavily. A system voice warns him that his character is in a bleeding state and requires immediate treatment. He wonders if he is dead and complains that the game company could not afford a female voice actress. He pushes himself up from the snow and recognizes the area as the northern ice fields from a virtual reality game called Palladia. He is confused because he remembers already logging out. Suddenly, his head throbs with intense pain as unfamiliar memories flood his mind. He realizes these are the memories of Alvin Arian, a mysterious tribal youth. He recognizes this name as a quest NPC from the game and realizes he has transmigrated into the game as this character. He yells out to open his system interface. A screen appears in front of him, but he notices he still cannot log out. He checks his stats on the system screen and is completely shocked. His name is listed as Alvin with incredibly high attributes, including 19 strength and 18 constitution. He notes that most tier 1 characters only average around 12 points. He wonders what kind of pay-to-win character setup this is. He then checks his core attribute, which is called Reshaping the World. The system screen explains this is an incompletely released special talent that allows him to modify rules by consuming his own energy. Alvin realizes he has become the Star-Forging Titan, a final boss from a later game update. He looks at his hands and says he will not listen to fate. He wants to survive and rewrite his destiny. He remembers the game has several major events coming up, including wars with orcs and skeleton armies. He knows he must get stronger to survive these near-death experiences. He notes that it is mid-December and a severe winter storm called the White Tide is approaching. He decides he must survive the winter first to confirm the game's timeline and look for clues about bloodline purification. He states that this purification is the key to becoming a strong Titan. He is currently far away from his tribe and hundreds of kilometers away from the magic kingdom of Elrond. He remembers there is a hunter's cabin nearby in the woods with firewood and food. He plans to wait out the storm there and then hitch a ride with a caravan to the Central Empire. Lind is where the main storyline begins. He wants to go there to get the Alchemic Knight class, which he used in his past life to forge strong magic armor. Suddenly, he hears movement in the distance. He dives into the snow and hides. He looks over the snowdrift and sees figures approaching. He knows this is not a normal trade route, so they cannot be an ordinary caravan. A blonde woman is being chased by men in armor. The men ride black horses with blue flames and shoot crossbows at her. Alvin notices the black horses do not make any sound or show white breath in the cold air. He recognizes them as undead mounts favored by the nobles of Elrond. He then looks at the woman and recognizes her as Fredia Guthsmith, the Empress of the Magic Kingdom Elrond. Alvin watches the chase and realizes Fredia has not become the Empress yet, and is still just the eldest princess. He notes that the game's timeline is currently in the Age of Swords and Magic. Based on his experience as a veteran player, he estimates that the pursuers are no higher than tier 2 in strength. One of the pursuers asks if they should capture the princess alive, but another replies that there is no need. As a rider readies his crossbow, Alvin jumps out of the snow and grabs the front leg of the galloping undead horse. The rider is startled and yells that someone is there. Alvin complains that they interrupted his hiding plan. He pulls out a knife and attacks the rider. The man draws a blade to block and tells Alvin it is his bad luck to meet the blood race. Alvin grabs the man's wrist and punches him forcefully in the face, knocking him off the horse. The other pursuers notice the attack and yell to kill him. As they fire their crossbows, Alvin grabs the stunned rider and holds him up as a human shield. The crossbow bolts pierce the man's back. The leader curses at his men for shooting their own ally. Alvin realizes that these tier 2 enemies only have attributes around 16, which is lower than his own stats. Fredia and her bird look back at the commotion. The leader tells one of his men to take care of the barbarian, and the man agrees. The uninjured rider approaches, and the man Alvin is holding says he was just careless for a moment. Alvin easily lifts the human shield and throws him directly at the approaching rider, knocking him off his horse to the ground. The rider stands up, revealing pale skin with red patches and glowing red eyes. He realizes Alvin is skilled and introduces himself as a Tier 2 embracer. He lunges at Alvin with a dagger, telling him to experience the speed of the blood race. Alvin simply raises his arm and blocks the incoming blade with his metal arm guard. Alvin realizes the blood race's rapier is dangerous and says he cannot be careless. He grabs the man's wrist, trapping the blade, and asks to see how he will draw his sword now. Alvin clenches his fist, which begins to glow with power, and declares that it is his turn. He delivers a devastating punch directly into the man's face. The impact sends the pale rider flying backward, spitting blood. The leader of the pursuers watches in shock and curses, realizing that Alvin is suppressing a Tier 2 embrace using only raw physical stats. The leader throws down a smoke bomb and escapes into the snow, using a common trick to flee from stronger opponents. Nearby, Fredia sits on top of one of the injured pursuers and repeatedly bashes his head with a heavy rock to finish him off. Alvin walks over, dusting off his hands, and announces that he has taken down his opponent. He looks at Fredia, whose face and hands are covered in blood, and awkwardly notes that things did not seem to go well for her. Fredia ignores him and rushes to her giant yellow bird, crying out its name, Flory. She hugs the dying bird's neck and gently closes its eyes, telling her partner and friend to rest in peace. After a moment, Fredia stands up and thanks Alvin for his help. She formally introduces herself as Fredia, the eldest princess of the Elrond Kingdom, and asks for the warrior's name. Alvin smiles and replies that calling him a warrior is an overstatement. He claims to just be a commoner who got lost on the icy plains. Fredia notices Alvin staring off to the side and asks what he is looking at. Alvin casually replies that he is just considering the issue of looting. He walks over to one of the defeated pursuers lying in the snow. Alvin holds his dagger over the man and pries valuable items off him, happily stating that it is all money while the bloody man screams in pain. Fredia watches this and asks again for his name and where he is from. Alvin stands up straight and introduces himself as Alvin Arian, a northerner. Fredia is surprised and asks if he is the blessed first son. Alvin is slightly shocked that she knows this title. She explains that she read about the tribes in the Royal Library's collection of Northern Geography. Alvin then asks what she plans to do next since she is being hunted. He mentions that the people chasing her are annoying, and he is just a passerby. Fredia points out that he does not act like a simple passerby. She tells him she must head to the border because the capital is no longer safe. Looking back at the dead horses and bodies in the snow, she explains that she left with only a few guards in order to avoid the real trap. Alvin thinks about the history of Elrond, known as the Magic Kingdom. It is the birthplace of magic, and its ruler is often called the Demon King. The nobles in the inner ring treat commoners like cattle. The kingdom constantly needs resources from the north, and commoners often become hunters to survive the magic users. The kingdom also houses necromancers who demand bodies and souls. Alvin realizes the nobles want to replace the Demon King and have been causing chaos since the old king died 10 years ago. He knows the pursuers they just killed are not the only ones. Alvin asks Fredia why she thinks the border is safe when the capital is not. Fredia explains that only the army at the border remains loyal to the royal family. She plans to head to the northern fortress because it is the closest military base. Alvin thinks to himself that a military base will definitely have a teleportation array he can use. He agrees to go with her, but states they must deal with the dead bodies first to stop the blood race from tracking them. He walks over to one of the dead pursuers and pulls off the man's heavy brown cloak. He puts the cloak on and says he will use it to mask his scent. Fredia is shocked and warns him that wearing their clothes will leave a permanent scent on him. Alvin casually kicks the dead body and says the smell will disperse eventually. Fredia tries to argue, but Alvin suddenly looks down and yells for her to stay back. The dead body he just kicked opens its eyes, which now glow with a bright white light. The corpse groans for blood and suddenly sits up, grabbing Alvin's arm. Fredia looks on in terror and realizes the dead embracier has been turned into a blood slave. She states that someone nearby must be controlling the corpses. A pale hand is shown snapping its fingers. As soon as the snap occurs, the blood slave grabbing Alvin begins to glow with dark purple magic. Fredia yells that it is a corpse explosion. The dead body violently explodes in a massive blast of purple energy and blood, completely engulfing Alvin. As the purple smoke from the explosion clears, a terrifying red monster made of raw flesh and exposed bones stands in the gore. The necromancer leader, now wearing a horned skull mask, stands behind his creation and laughs. He boasts that Alvin was lucky to survive the explosion, but asks how he will fare against a mutant ghoul he spent half his life creating. Alvin steps out of the thick smoke, coughing and waving his hand. He is completely unharmed, but complains that the heavy cloak he just looted is now ruined. The necromancer commands his ghoul to tear them to pieces. Alvin quickly grabs Fredia, carrying her in his arms, and sprints away across the snowy plain. The giant red ghoul lets out a roar and chases after them with incredible speed. As the monster closes the distance, Alvin looks back over his shoulder with a confident smirk. He mocks the necromancer, stating that a mere tier 4 summon is not worthy of fighting him. In response, the ghoul unleashes a rapid barrage of glowing green magical projectiles. Alvin swiftly dodges the attack, and the green blasts explode violently into the snow all around them. Alvin continues to run away with Fredia. Frustrated, the ghoul leaps high into the sky above them, declaring that they will take their secrets to the grave. The monster charges a massive amount of green energy in its chest and unleashes an ultimate attack called Diffusion-type Death. A giant, terrifying green skull surrounded by green lightning forms in the air. Looking back over Alvin's shoulder, Fredia screams in absolute terror, recognizing the deadly spell as the Finger of Death. Alvin continues to run through the snow while carrying Fredia on his shoulder. Fredia blushes and yells at him to stop moving. She complains that he is holding her in a rude way. Behind them, the ghoul charges a huge ball of energy. Alvin looks back and counts the seconds in his head. He figures out that the monster's attack will reach its full power in exactly 4 seconds. Alvin tells the monster that it is too slow. He suddenly summons a crossbow in his free hand. While still running, he turns and shoots a single arrow. The arrow flies fast and hits the monster right in the center of its energy attack. The magic violently explodes in the ghoul's face, sending the monster crashing down into the snow. Alvin stops running and tells Fredia that they are safe. Fredia looks back in confusion and asks what just happened. The ghoul praises Alvin for the good hit and promises to remember him. In the large city of Elrond capital, Yvonnemore, inside a palace hallway, a knight runs quickly across the checkered floor. The knight kneels beside the king lying in a grand bed. The knight reports that the royal sister is missing and begs to take the silver knights to go rescue her. The king immediately refuses the request. He orders the guards and the knight to stay in the city. He explains that the knight must stay to take over the demon king's throne. The knight looks up in shock, arguing that the sister was the one supposed to inherit the crown. The king says the kingdom cannot fall into chaos. He explains that his health is failing. He could collapse at any moment, and there is still no news of the sister. Because of this, they need a successor ready right away. The knight bows their head, quietly agrees to the order, and walks away, left alone. The sick king sighs heavily and looks at a large family painting on the wall. He wonders where his beloved daughter Fredia could possibly be. Back in the snowy fields, the necromancer and his defeated red monster use teleportation magic to escape. Alvin watches the empty space and complains that the villains ran away without even saying they would be back. Fredia stares at Alvin and demands to know who he really is. Alvin points to himself and simply claims that he is just a normal barbarian. Fredia crosses her arms and yells that he is a liar. She explains that real northern people hate the word barbarian and only call themselves Northmen. She also questions how a simple warrior could possibly know so much about rare and complex necromancy magic. Alvin holds up his hand nervously and tells Fredia he cannot give her the real reason for his knowledge. He tells her to just pretend a wise spirit whispered the secrets into his ear. Fredia smiles, crosses her arms, and says she dislikes liars, but she will forgive him this time. She grabs the edge of her long dress and bows deeply. She thanks him sincerely for saving her twice and promises that her royal family will definitely reward him for his help. Suddenly, a strong wind blows across the snowy field and lifts Fredia's dress up. Alvin stares with wide eyes and accidentally shouts the white. Fredia's face turns bright red as she quickly holds her dress down and yells at him not to look. Alvin sweats and points his finger past her. He quickly explains that he was not talking about her clothes. He points to a massive wave of snow crashing down the mountain right at them. He screams that the deadly white tide has arrived. Alvin immediately grabs her and throws her over his shoulder again. He yells out to run and sprints away from the giant avalanche as fast as possible. They race through the snow and manage to reach a small wooden hunter's cabin. Inside the dark cabin, a pot of food bubbles over a fire. Alvin and Fredia sit on the wooden floor around the fire. Alvin holds a bowl of food and asks how she planned to fight the 3 vampires if he had not stepped in to help her. Fredia smiles confidently and holds out her fist to show him a golden bracelet made of glowing flower-shaped gems. Alvin looks surprised and recognizes the item as a powerful gem scroll. He notes that using this magic item would have easily destroyed the vampires in an instant. Fredia agrees and points out that Alvin knows a lot of hidden information. She then asks him to explain why he thinks the necromancers are trying to assassinate her. Alvin tells Fredia they need to think carefully. He says they must figure out who benefits the most if she dies. Fredia looks down and guesses that her brother, Prince Otto, would be the one to benefit. Alvin remembers the night from the palace and calls Otto a cross-dressing prince. He then warns Fredia not to be tricked by how things look. He explains that even though her death would make the prince look like the winner, that is not the actual truth. Fredia drinks from her warm bowl and smiles in agreement. She says her brother Otto is a coward who would never have the guts to order an attack like this, even if he drank a whole bottle of strong Elrond vodka. Alvin explains the real political situation. He states that the current Demon King is very sick. If a weak heir like Otto takes the throne, the fighting between the kingdom's reformers and conservatives will only get worse. He reveals that the true winner of this chaos would be a hidden third-party group that controls the most resources in the kingdom. Fredia looks shocked as she realizes the necromancer faction is behind the attack. She quickly stands up and declares she must return to the capital, Ivanmore, immediately to stop them. Alvin calmly stirs the pot of food over the fire and warns her that stepping outside during the white tide will freeze her solid in 30 seconds. Fredia argues that she cannot just sit safely while enemies destroy her kingdom. Alvin smiles and explains that the worst part of the storm will only last for 3 days, and the villains will not make a move during this time. He points out that her simply being alive and knowing their secret is the biggest threat to the necromancer's plans. Fredia asks the ordinary barbarian for his advice, and Alvin tells her that her first step to winning is just making it back to the capital alive. Hearing this, Fredia looks surprised, but then becomes very serious. She holds out her hand with the glowing gem bracelet and formally asks Alvin to become her knight and form a contract with her to stop the conspiracy. Alvin immediately refuses the offer. He explains that he has his own tasks to complete and cannot stay in Elrond for a long time, knowing secretly that these royal contracts are a lifelong commitment until death. Fredia insists she must stop the villains, but notes she has no land or titles to give him right now. She blushes and nervously offers herself as payment if he becomes her Black Knight. Alvin spits out his drink in shock and quickly waves his hands in panic. He clarifies that he did not mean he wanted her and repeats that he truly has his own mission. Instead of a contract, he asks her to repay him by performing a secret Elrond magic rite for him in the future. He agrees to help her while silently wondering how a princess could be so bold compared to modern women. Fredia agrees to do the magic ritual for Alvin once her energy returns, as long as it is not a forbidden secret. She asks him what kind of ritual it is so she can get the right materials ready. Alvin walks toward her and raises his hand. Blue magic sparks around his fingers. He says it is hard to explain with just words, so he decides to show her instead. He activates his special talent called Reshaping the World. A bright blue light suddenly surrounds his body. Alvin thinks to himself that his borrowed body's memories and Titan powers are getting much stronger. He also remembers his own personal mission to find out the truth about a burned village. Outside, the snow continues to fall on the small wooden cabin. Inside, Alvin creates a giant glowing wall of text and symbols. Fredia looks up at the bright writing in complete shock. She reads it and realizes it is a secret blueprint for a ritual that can easily create many strong, Tier 3 warriors. Alvin smiles and asks if there is an issue. He explains that the required items will cost a lot of money, but they can buy most of them secretly on the black market. He notes that dragon blood is the only really rare item they will need to find. Fredia looks at him with worry. She asks if he truly plans to use this dangerous method to stop the coming war. Alvin smiles calmly and explains that power is not good or bad on its own. He says only the people using the power make it good or evil. He then reminds her that she is a smart scholar looking at the blueprint, not an evil demon king. Hearing his wise words, Fredia stares at him in silence. She places her hand on her chest and swears an oath on her royal bloodline. She promises never to share or use the blueprint without Alvin's permission. Alvin tells her she does not need to be so serious. He says the closest city is Flanders, and they will go there for materials after the snowstorm passes in 3 days. 3 days later, in a large busy city, a famous trading city ruled directly by the Demon King and free from noble control, a man yelling for people to make way. Alvin watches him from inside a horse carriage. He recognizes these workers as low-level demons from the game, but notes they feel much more real in person. He realizes once again that he is in the real world, and not just a dream. Fredia happily announces they have arrived. They step down from the carriage onto the cobblestone street. Fredia notices Alvin looking around carefully and asks what he is staring at. Alvin whispers for her to be careful because they are being watched. Fredia looks worried and asks if the enemies have already spotted them. Alvin grabs her hand to lead her away as they stand together in the middle of the crowded city square.